Hey gamers, we're back with another episode of Let's Create a Competitive Card Game. In this episode, I'll be expanding on the rulebook by adding a how to play / getting started section. So let's get started. Alright, so last episode I revealed the icon logo and came up with the last two card types, companions and relics. Now, companions represent powerful allies to the player, and the way they work within the game is the longer they are in play, the more effects they have. And relics represent objects which exist outside of the now, or rather the game world, or this instance of the game world, I should say. And they are the only card type which can be attached to other cards. So with those two new card types, we now have a total of 6 card types. One, the class card, which does not go into the deck, and the other 5 card types go into the deck, so the follower skills, talents, companions, and relics are part of the deck. So what I want to do this episode is add a how to play section, or rather a getting started section, and it will do just that. It will tell the player how to get started with this game. So let's go ahead and start this. So, what are some things you need to get started with this game? So let's say in order to play this game, let's say you'll need what will you need? You'll need a deck, obviously. A class card. Way to keep track of your life. And you'll need a way to keep track of your ability points, so your skill points and talent points. So something that I'm not too sure about right now is if the ability points, so skill points and talent points, if they'll be physical cards, or will a player need some arbitrary way to keep track of those points. From a game design perspective, it makes the most sense to actually make physical cards for these skill and talent points, and just have the player set them off on the side in some other deck, and at the start of their turn, when they choose whether they want to gain a skill point or a talent point, they would just choose one from their deck. Not randomly, they would actually just pick a skill point or talent point and add it to their ability point pool. So I'll give that some more thought later, but for now, I'll just say that they need a way to keep track of that. And for now, I will abbreviate skill points and talent points, as this is just a rough draft of the rulebook, and in the final version, I'll go ahead and spell those out. So let me add some space here. So now, something else you need to know is, let's say, how much life does a player have in this game? So first with life, let's think, what system is life based on? Is it a base 10, 100, or base 1000 system? So there's games like Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you have 8,000 life points. There's games where your life points are in the hundreds, and there's games where your life points are like 25 life points, 50 life points, 50 endurance, etc. So I prefer games where your life points are more of a smaller number. It's easier to calculate instead of games where you have thousands of life points and you're doing, say, 250 damage at a time, or 1500 damage. It's a lot simpler to, say, calculate 50 minus 10 than 8,000 minus 350 or something like that. So for now, I'll just say each player starts the game with 30 life. And one, I'm not sure if I'm going to call it life in this game. I'll just put that there for now. And two, 30 is just a number I just thought of. There will need to be some play testing to see if that is a good start or not. And for all of the rules, from here on out, they will definitely require playtesting and adjustments. So these will not be the final rules. These are just the pre-playtesting rules. So now something else is, I mentioned a deck. So what does a deck consist of? So let's say something like decks must, and let's say what must decks have? So first, what is the card limit? So again, looking at other games, there are games where you have a 40 card limit, 60 card limit, 75 card limit, etc. So I don't want a game where there's a super low card limit like 40, but I don't want one where there's a high card limit like 75 or 60, as a lot of times you don't even get to see the majority of your deck. So I would say a deck must contain 50 cards. And let's say your class card isn't included in this limit. And just to make this interesting, let's say exactly. So your deck must contain exactly 50 cards. And the next thing to think about with decks is how many copies of a card can you have? So I want a majority of the cards in a deck to be, let's say, different. So normally there's card limits like 4 or 5. So with a 50 card deck, a 4 card copy limit would mean at the minimum you would only need, say, 13 different cards. And with, say, a 3 card copy limit, you would need a minimum of, let's say, 17 cards. So with a 3 card limit, more cards are being used, or rather more different cards are being used. So I think I like that a lot better than the 4 card limit. So let's say contain no more than 3 copies of a card. And I imagine I may do something where certain cards you can only have 1 copy in your deck, or maybe you can only have 1 copy in play. So I may do something like that. Now, the next thing for getting started would be how or what happens before you actually start playing the game. So let's say something like before the game starts, you have to do the following steps. Let's say and let's say the first step is, so one, the class card doesn't go in your deck. So let's say the first thing you have to do is each player has to place their class card in play. Let's say on the playing surface for now. And I'll have to come back and reword some of this. And, so place. Okay, so here's one thing. Is it face up or face down? Let's say face up. As I think that will lead to some tactical choices. And I say that as if there is a mulligan in this game, and the first thing a player does is placing their class cards face up, and then say you draw your cards after, and there is a mulligan that you can choose based on the class and the information or the things you know about that class. You can make an informed decision on if you should mulligan or not. So that is a strategic aspect. So let's actually say before you even shuffle or draw cards, let's say the companion, each player has to place their companion in play. So let's say something like each player chooses a companion. Or let's say each player chooses a companion from their deck and places it face down in the play area. And I believe I mentioned this last episode. And that was that during a player's turn, if that player had enough ability points to play their companion, then they could play that companion. So let's say something along the lines of that. Let's say has enough ability points, and ability points are just skill points or talent points. And let's just say, actually, let's just say SP/TP. Let's say yeah, that player may play this companion. And let's say if they do not control a companion, you can only control one companion at a time. Now, what's next? Let's say after getting out your class card and choosing your companion, let's say now each player has to shuffle their deck. And let's say the opponent can then shuffle and or cut their deck. The opponent, let's say, and now after this step, let's say, how do we choose who plays first or who draws cards first, etc. So this is supposed to be a competitive game, so how about something like, let's say the lower ranking player decides who plays first. I think that's pretty interesting. The lower ranking player decides who plays first. And so what happens if both players are the same rank? So let's say if both players, let's say, randomly decide who plays first. And again, I'll elaborate later on what randomly deciding means, but that just means, you know, flip a coin, something random, and the winner chooses if they want to play or pass. And something else that probably doesn't need saying is, let's say when playing outside of the tournament, players randomly decide who go first. So let's see. So after deciding who plays first, now let's see how many cards should a player draw slash is there a hand limit? So I can say right off the bat there will be no hand limit in this game. It doesn't really make sense to me why some games have hand limits, as that just means certain cards don't really get played within the game. Now I know based on certain game mechanics that can be a good thing. For instance, if there's a game or class mechanic where cards being discarded makes something happen, then yeah, it's good in that aspect. But generally, discarding cards means that you won't be able to play that card. So for this game, there will be no hand limit, and let's just say each player draws, let's say for now, 6 cards, depending on playtest. Now, okay. Now, after drawing your cards, let's see. Something I do like with certain games is mulligans. So I do want a mulligan within this game. So the question then is, how does the mulligan work? So I think I'll say that each player can decide if they would like to mulligan. And to mulligan, you put the same number of cards from your hand onto the bottom of your deck. Or I shouldn't say same, you put any number of cards, so you don't have to mulligan your hand. Let's say you can mulligan certain cards. So you can put any number of cards from your hand into the bottom of your deck. And let's say during your first mulligan, you draw the same amount of cards from your deck. And each mulligan after that, let's say you draw 1 less card. And let's say if you only have 1 card in your hand, then you can't mulligan. So I think that is a pretty robust mulligan system. So let's just type that all out. Let's say each player decides if they would like to mulligan. And after that, any player who wishes to mulligan, let's say you can put any number of cards from your hand onto the bottom of your deck. They put any number of cards. And let's say during the first mulligan, you draw the same number of cards. And let's say each mulligan after the first, you draw 1 less card. Then let's say you may not mulligan if you only have 1 card in your hand. And I'll go back and maybe fix some of this later with regard to the wording of how to mulligan and the explanation. So after the mulligan, let's see. So something I've been thinking about with the ability point system is, does a player start the game with ability points? And I think it is a good idea to say that players start the game. Of course, we'll have to play test this, but for now, I'm gonna say players let's say players can distribute or let's say players start the game with 3 ability points, and they can distribute that however they want between skill points and talent points. And let's say that whoever's playing first has to do it first, as it could be a tactical decision or a tactical choice for the opponent to make with regards to what they'll gain based on what their opponent has already gained. So let's say that. So let's say player going first. Let's say it distributes 3 ability points. On skill points / talent points as they wish. And let's say followed by the opponent doing the same. And let's say this is all for the getting started. So the initial setup when you start the game, yeah, let's say this is all. Let's say something like the game now starts. So to get started with this game, you need the deck, class card, way to keep track of your life, and way to keep track of your ability points. And when the game is starting, you first choose your class card, or you first put your class card out face up so both players can see what their opponent is playing. And from there, both players can search their decks for a companion and put it face down. So that is a tactical choice to make based on what class your opponent is playing as. Some companions might do better against other classes, and you can think, hey, if I'm playing this, my opponent's playing that, so they may choose this companion. So it kind of adds a level of strategicness to the game. And after that, you do the traditional deck shuffle and cut, followed by the lower ranking player choosing who plays first. And then after that, you draw 6 cards, do the mulligan, and then distribute your ability points. So that seems like a pretty legit game setup. So that will be all for this episode, and what I'll do in the next episode is I'll start on turn structure, as we did the getting started or how to play. So the next thing really to do will be the turn structure. So that's what I'll do next episode. Thanks guys, be sure to like, subscribe, and all of that other good stuff. Thanks.